That's right. The first belt awarded in a sport can be tracked back to a bare knuckles boxing match won by Tom Cribb in England in 1810. And since then, the tradition has evolved into probably the most iconic sports awards of all time. So, today, let's explore that and how it's made boxing championship belts. Commissioning. Nowadays, almost all high-profile combat-related sports involve an award in the form of some kind of belt, from MMA to wrestling to most famously boxing. And with the titles like WWE World Champion for wrestlers and the famous WBC belt in boxing being some of the most sought-after awards in any sport, it's no wonder that making a belt that reflects the value of the title is an important task. This makes a lot of people assume that these belts are made by the institutions that award them, like the aforementioned World Boxing Council. But that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, just as the sports they signify have long-standing traditions, so does the making of these belts. This is why the first step in the making of a championship belt for all the major titles is to commission the belt from independent craftsmen. These are people who have been making belts for a long time and make everything from the medallions and jewels to the leather by hand in their garages. But before they can actually start making the individual belts, the first step for these belt makers is designing the belt. This is the step that is most different between individual belts. From boxy industrial designs to ornate jewelry-like ones, the decisions made during this step will define the way a title will be perceived for generations. So you can understand how it's a little too important to be glossed over. The design process usually starts with a bunch of sketches and plans done in collaboration with the title organization, which dictates its requirements for each belt that the belt maker will then showcase in their design. This design usually consists of the leather belt, the center plate, which includes the organization logo, the title name, and some sort of graphic showing the type of award it is, whether international, national, or just between a couple of countries, and the side plates, which can showcase a bunch of things, like the champion's name, portrait, their national flag, or simply a smaller version of the center plate design. But whatever the design choices may be, the belt maker will draw dozens of sketches representing the final product, including individual sketches for every major detail. And once the design has been finalized and approved by the title organization, the belt maker can finally move on to crafting the actual thing. Modeling. Now, once the 2D design has been finalized, the natural next step is to transfer it to 3D. For this, the artisans at the workshop make a clay model of the belt plates using the design sketches, all the while adding or removing details along the way. Since clay is so soft, this step is pretty easy to accomplish, but in order to turn it into an actual metal belt, they need to make a cast of that model. Casting. For this, they first use plaster to create a mold of the clay model, and then use that mold to cast a light metal model, which then they refine and sharpen. This temporary metal model is then used to create a metal mold that is finally used to cast the actual plates. These are usually made of something like tin or aluminum that'll then be plated in precious metals later on. But for now, the cast plates are allowed to cool off before the belt maker moves on to the next step. Refining. Now, while the artisans try to refine and perfect the models and molds throughout the modeling process, it is inevitable that some of the more intricate details get a little muddled, not to mention the plain, rough surface caused by any kind of molding. So, to counter that, the belt maker spends the next few hours manually refining and polishing each and every rough surface on the belt plates, from shallow ridges and uneven stripes to rough spots on the outside and chunks of stray metal. Each and every blemish is removed by hand using files, chisels, and even some electric tools. This step is actually very similar to the work done by jewelers, and seeing as this belt will soon be glistening with precious metal, it's not really a surprise. And once the surface is refined and uniform, it is almost time for finishing it. But before that can happen, there's one final step: extra details. Now, while 90% of the details from the design are easily made during the casting process, there may be some details that simply cannot be made by casting. These include stuff like tiny intricate sculptures and lettering. So before the metal can be finalized, the workers first manually create these sculptures, much like how a jeweler would by bending and shaping pure metal into the desired shape. And once this process is done and these details have been attached, we can finally move on to the last metal making process: plating and polishing. This is the process that converts the relatively simple surfaces of the belt into the shiny and extremely valuable ones that we see on screen. For this, the belt needs to first be buffed by polishing it on a buffing wheel, and then cleaned thoroughly to remove any dust or shavings that might interfere with the electroplating. After this, all that is left is to electroplate the belt, first with a layer of copper that helps bind all the layers, then with a layer of nickel to enhance the shine, and finally with a layer of yellow or white gold depending on the design. And if the design carries multiple surfaces with different metals, those surfaces are first covered with plastic tape while the rest is electroplated with metal number 1 before the covering is reversed and the rest of the belt can be plated with metal number 2. But once this is done, all that is left for the metal plates is to add additional details. These may include things like crystals that are used to highlight certain molded cavities, to precious gemstones like rubies, sapphires, and even real diamonds that might be added to various parts of the belt. Also, added during the step is the enamel paint for the logos and graphics. Enamel's used both because it looks better and because it retains its color and gloss for a very long time. To add this, enamelers paint the metal bits with special jewelry grade enamel that once applied is put into an oven to dry and set. And with that, the center and side plates are complete, meaning all that is left is making the belt. This is a relatively straightforward process, but seeing as these belts are supposed to be the single greatest prestige in their respective categories, the greatest care is taken in the making of the belt. First, high-grade leather is sourced from the best sourcers. Then, a craftsman traces the eventual shape of the belt onto the leather. This shape is then cut out using a mechanical bandsaw or by hand. Once this is done, the belt maker moves on to creating the belt's lining. Since this belt is meant to be wearable by boxers who are going to be wearing it directly over their skin, the inside of the belt has to be comfortable and non-irritating. For this, spandex or faux fur is used to create a lining that is then sewn onto the leather before a heated element is used to emboss the belt's serial number and the belt maker's insignia onto the strap. Once this is done, the craftsman uses high-grade vinyl to pipe the belt's edges, sealing the different layers together. After this, all that is left is to add the organization logo to the back before the whole thing is flattened with mallets to prepare for the final assembly. Speaking of which, the last stop on our list is, and you guessed it, the assembly. Here, the central and side plates are first attached to the belt using vinyl or stitching before a similar technique is used to add some kind of fastening mechanism to the end of the leather straps to allow the belt winner to wear the belt to their requirement. And once everything has been added, the belt is deemed complete, meaning that all that's left now is to give the belt one final cleaning before it is packaged into a handcrafted, bespoke case for presentation worthy of the title. Click on any one of the two videos on your screen right now. We'll catch you guys in the next one.